Good morning and welcome to Unveiled, a presentation of the Church Street Church of Christ in Lewisburg, Tennessee. Unveiled is simply a one-on-one conversation between Christian people designed to help each of us as followers of Christ become more aware of and better respond to the presence of God at work in our daily lives. All right, today our special guest is Kim Anderson. And Kim, first of all, thank you for being with me today. And I want to begin by just giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself to all of our listeners.
Okay, well, I'm Kimberly Anderson. There's not many people in Marshall County, I think, that don't know who I am just because of my time spent at Marshall County High School. I've been a teacher there for 28 years. I've lived in this community my entire life, so a lot of people know me through various avenues. My husband is Steve Anderson. He's a captain at the Lewisburg Fire Department, and I have two children. Luke Anderson, he's a firefighter paramedic in Murfreesboro now. Still works part-time for Marshall County. And my daughter is Lauren Ham. She fell in love with a cowboy and moved away from me. And she lives in Hohenwald. They live on Riverside Valley Farms, and she's a country girl now. They go to Lomax Church of Christ. And I have two granddaughters, Ellie and Maddie, and they consume most of my time.
And how old are they?
Ellie is 5 and Maddie is 2.
Okay. So you mentioned Luke earlier, too, and I know Luke has spent some time in the military. Tell us a little bit about that.
He has. Luke signed, he's almost done with his 6 years for the Tennessee Army National Guard. And he had already been to paramedic school and was wanting to be a flight medic. And he was advised that that would be a good career path. So he chose the Tennessee Army National Guard, went to combat medic school, and then came back and also went to Vanderbilt Critical Care Paramedic School. And so he was a flight medic for AirEvac for a while. But, on the ambulance and the flights, he sees a lot of really terrible things. And so over the years, I think it just kind of was getting to him. So he decided to go to firefighter school like his dad. Mm-hmm. And he's still a paramedic with the firefighter, but he actually works for a firefighter station in Murfreesboro.
Okay. All right. So I know that you mentioned that a lot of people probably know you because you've been around these parts for a long time and very involved at Marshall County High School. But tell me a little bit about your religious upbringing, your religious background, and at what point in your life did you realize in a personal way that God is real and your faith became your own?
Well, I started going to Church Street Church of Christ when I was 2 weeks old because my mom brought me to church with my Aunt Vivian and my grandmother. And we all would sit back here on the back row. I can still remember where we sat all the time. But I was raised here in the church, and it's been a very vital part of my life. I think that I always knew God was real because that's how I was raised to believe. And I got baptized when I was 14. I was very active in the youth group here. Joe Essner was our youth director, and he was an amazing youth director and really brought a lot of young people to Christ. I think I knew that my religion was... that's a really hard question for me when I've been in the church my entire life because there wasn't like an aha moment. But I do think that I was very dependent on my mom and my aunt and a lot of the matriarchs in our church, Miss Vandiver, Miss Daniels, just to mention a couple. There are many more. But I think when my mom passed away, I had this moment of, okay, girl, it's up to you now. You've got to step up and be the grown-up and make sure your children are coming to church just like my mom did.
And how old were you at the time when your mother passed?
I was 42, 3.
Okay. And how old would your children have been then?
My daughter was in high school.
Okay.
And my son was in middle school.
So at that moment, you're saying you knew that you would now be moving into the position of kind of that matriarch. You mentioned Miss Vandiver and Miss Daniels and others at the Church Street congregation that were kind of mentors or that mother role to you, as well as to many other people, including your own mother. But now you're realizing at age 42 or whatever that you are the person that's moving into that role, and there might be some other young boys and girls that look to you as kind of a matriarch. How did that transition make you feel?
It was very scary, honestly, because it's a huge responsibility to have the souls of your children in your hands.
Yeah. And with being at the high school for 28 years, a little bit of a matriarch figure there as well, right?
Oh, yes. A lot of the kids call me Miss A. When Lauren was in college, some of her friends called me, it was a nickname, they called me Mama Pooch. We won't get into that, but I've always kind of felt that role with young people. And even now, here at church, some of my former students are going to church here. And they talk to me after church, and we go eat lunch. Actually, a incident not long ago. Of course, Steve being a firefighter, he has to work. The weekends, holidays, none of that. He doesn't just automatically get that off from work. So a lot of times I'm on my own now that my kids are grown and moved away. And I went to Russell's to eat lunch because I was really hungry. And I went and I was sitting at a table on my own. And two of those students who go to church here, they're married to each other, came in, and they weren't going to have it that I was sitting alone. You know, they wanted me to sit with them. And so it just really touched my heart. And that stuff like that makes me realize more the influence that I'm having.
It hopefully causes you to see that there is a bigger story than just your own personal family and your own personal experience, that God has some plans for you, that you fit into a very special niche in life that no one else can fill. And that's part of the reason for our discussion here, is to not only to help you to realize that, but to help myself, all of our listeners, to realize our lives are bigger than ourselves. This is a big, big story that God is writing, and we're the actors or the players in that story. So when I go back with you to your childhood, and obviously you had a great honor and respect for your mother, and you felt very close to her. How did she demonstrate to you that faith was more than just church attendance?
Oh, wow. Well, my mom, of course, church attendance was part of it.
Yes.
We never missed church for anything. I mean, you were deathly ill if we missed church. But she, I could just see it in the way she lived her life. You know, she was very faithful to God. She was very much into the ladies' days and things like that at church, and participated in those things. But I think what really expressed it to me was when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. I saw a strength in her that I don't know if I could have. Yeah.
So you know that came from a deeper place.
It did.
That she wasn't a person that just talked the talk, but she was actually walking the walk.
She did. She said to me, and when she first got breast cancer, she had to take 6 months of chemotherapy. And she got really, really sick by the 5th treatment. And she refused the 6th one. And, of course, I was very upset. I wanted my mom. I was being selfish, you know, and I was worried about what was going to happen. And she said to me, well, Kim, my quality of life is just as important to me as how long it is. And she said, if it's God's will for me to go, then I'm ready.
Well, and that's something, of course, all of us would want to be able to say, no matter what happens to us. We don't know the future. We don't know. No. We're not promised tomorrow. We're not even promised today. So hopefully we can be so aware of God and his working in our life that we can say, just like your mom did, if it's my time to go, I'm ready. I mean, that's really the point, really, of everything we do. So that's a fascinating transition now that you've made. You're the matriarch. You're the person who is, whether you recognize it always or not, there are a lot of young people, maybe even students, maybe young people at church that look to you and say, that's what it looks like to be a Christian woman, a Christian leader, and so you're to be commended for recognizing that and making that transition. Let's talk a little bit about how you met your husband and what role do you think God played in bringing your paths together?
Well, I actually met Steve at a Chapel Hill at a gathering. He rode Harley Davidson motorcycles, and so he was riding with my cousin and her husband. And when I went up to talk to them at this gathering, he was sitting there, and I thought he was a very nice looking man. And they introduced us, and it just kind of took off from there. We started dating, and a year later, we got married.
Wow. So, did it just happen to be a coincidence that your paths cross, or?
I was not even supposed to go to that gathering that night. I was headed to Murfreesboro to see one of my friends that was still in college, and I was going to spend the weekend with her. And then she called me at the last minute and said she was in a wedding, and she said it was going to take longer than she thought. So I was with another girlfriend of mine that was going with me to Murfreesboro. So we just decided to stop there because we knew some people were going to be there. So there was no intention to ever be there in the first place.
So now that we think like Christian people serving God, we understand that there really are no coincidences in life. So do you think God may have had a hand in maybe those circumstances changing just enough to get both you and Steve at the same place in Chapel Hill?
I think so. Because he was working in Lewisburg, and I had been going to college in Murfreesboro, and he was from Murfreesboro. We never met there. And it was odd to me that we met in the middle and in Chapel Hill. So
he grew up in Murfreesboro?
He did. He graduated from Riverdale High School over there. And
was he still living in Murfreesboro when you were going to college at MTSU?
Yes.
So there would be seemingly several opportunities for your paths to cross there, but they didn't.
No.
You said he was working in Lewisburg.
He was working.
And so you lived in Lewisburg,
right?
But had never seemed like even more of a possibility that you might run across one another in Lewisburg.
Yeah, and my father worked at ICP where he did. They just worked in different departments.
So it's interesting.
Really kind of weird.
It's interesting that you have all these occasions that really maybe make more sense, and then you just happen to be in Chapel Hill at the same time when you meet.
I thought about that often, that it was just meant to be.
Yeah.
He and I both have said that it was meant to be. And he was very, he wasn't as different from me as I thought he was when I first met him. Of course, you have to get to know somebody. But a lot of my friends didn't think we would ever make it.
And why is that?
They just thought we were different. And I could see who he really was, because he was not a person that opened up to other people. And as I was dating him, he opened up to me a lot, and I could tell how much of a caring person he was and how much of the Christian background he did have, that, maybe some of my friends didn't take time to know.
So what was his religious background?
He was Church of Christ, just like I was.
And so he had grown up in a church in Murfreesboro.
Yes, he went to Minerva Church of Christ in Murfreesboro, and his grandmother was really his support system, I guess you would say. She lived in Woodbury, but he spent a lot of time with her. And
he would go to church with her or with his parents, or?
Both.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So once the two of you met and you dated and ultimately got married, you, I guess, decided to make your home in Lewisburg at that point?
We did.
And what role do you think God may have played in that decision? Why would you settle in Lewisburg, not Murfreesboro, or not Nashville, or some other place?
Well, I think part of it was just at that time I was working as well, and I had a steady job in Lewisburg. He had a really good job in Lewisburg, and he had moved and rented a house in Murfreesboro. And I think that with my parents being here, he wanted me to be close to my mom. He knew how much my mom meant to me. And he said, it's just an hour we can drive and see my parents. So I just think it was just a mutual decision. And I think maybe God placed me here for that reason. I'll tell you this story. I went to college for 3 years, and I quit college. That was before I met Steve. And that was a big mistake in my life. But I just, I don't know. Sometimes you just make the wrong choices. And I went to work, and when I met Steve on our very first date, he said to me, I told him that I'd been to college and I didn't finish. And he said, "You're crazy. You need to finish." He said, "You're too smart to not finish." So when we got married, he wanted me to go back to school. He said, "It's not going to do anything but help you and help our family." So he worked. And actually, I had signed up to go back to school. And then I found out I was pregnant with our first child. And my dad did not want me driving back and forth to Murfreesboro, pregnant. So he said, no, you're going to have to wait. So I waited another year, and I went back. So he was just always so giving to me for what I wanted or needed. I think that's, and then I think that may be why I wound up in Marshall County.
So were the 3 years that you spent in college before you met Steve, were you studying to be a teacher at that point?
I was.
And then when you stopped going to college, what kind of job did you have at that time?
I worked for Lewisburg Printing. I was their accounts receivable clerk.
Okay. Did you still have it in your heart that you wanted to be a teacher at some point, or had you given up on that dream by then?
I had some financial things I had to take care of, and so I felt like I needed to work. My family, my mom was a secretary. My dad worked at ICP. He got laid off from work a lot. And we didn't have a lot when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my mom and dad had always instilled in me a work ethic we didn't owe people money. We didn't,
right.
Stuff like that. So I think that was just part of it, that I felt like I needed to work.
So you felt the obligation to work, but did you still hope that at some point you would get into teaching, or had you just kind of given up on that?
When I was in high school, I loved Marshall County High School. Fred Shelton was our principal, and he instilled such a pride in community and school that I always wanted to come back to. I didn't want to teach anywhere else. I always wanted to come to Marshall County and teach.
So after you married Steve, and Steve saw that you needed to finish your college, and you went back to MTSU, I assume got your degree in education.
I did.
Did you immediately, upon graduation, get a job at Marshall County High School?
No, it took 2 years for me to get a job. I worked back at the newspaper office while I was trying to get a job. Mr. Hawkins was very good to me. But when I finally got, there was a lady, Miss Leonard, Betsy Leonard, and she taught economics. And she called me and she said, "I know you're looking for a job and I'm about to retire." And she said, "You really need to come up here and talk to the principal." And so I did. She knew my mom and dad. So I went up there, and the principal at that time was Mr. Dukes. And I went and talked to him, and he hired me for a part-time job. And I only worked half day. And then the very next year, the business teacher, Robbie Joyce, transferred to Chapel Hill, and the job came open. And I've had it ever since.
So have you always taught in the same subject field?
I have. I taught economics and government my first year. And now I teach. I've taught many different business subjects. I've taught, right now I'm teaching Intro to Business and Marketing, and I've always taught accounting for 28 years. And I've taught international business. I've taught computer apps, keyboarding, you name it, I've taught it probably.
Well, it's fascinating to hear the story and how, it seems in most people's mind coincidentally that your path crosses with Steve. The two of you meet, you date, you get married. You end up being convinced by him to go back to school. Mm-hmm. You have another job in the meantime. Now you you get what you really wanted all along, is to go back to your alma mater to teach.
Yeah.
And you know as well as I do, things like that don't just happen.
No.
You know, it's very clear to me just by listening to your story that God has a place for you. And I think you've found that. I mean, obviously, after 28 years, it's important for you as well as your students to see that you're more than just their teacher, that you are a lover of God and you've devoted your life to Him. And I think that's evident to them. And you know, sometimes Christian people get bogged down thinking, you know, I don't know if I'm evangelistic enough because I'm not sitting down having one-on-one Bible studies. Mm-hmm. But I think God powerfully uses people in whatever it is they do well to be evangelistic. And you may not think of yourself much as an evangelist, but you're in a great role where people are learning from you. They are seeing God in you. And again, that's part of the reason for this program, is to help all of us be aware that God can use us just like we are, as long as we give Him the honor and when we stay faithful to Him. So that's really what our goal is. What do you think God is up to now, after all these things? We've talked about your family, your children, your grandchildren even. What about now at this stage of your life?
Well, I've thought about that a little bit. And I think that as I'm getting older, that I can see more of the influence that I have on others, where I think when you're younger, you're just going through your life and you don't really realize what kind of influence you have on other people. And, you know, I guess I just want people to know, and I teach my students, I tell my students the story about me not finishing college and going back, because I think they get discouraged. They think that everybody's life is perfect, and it's not. And sometimes you make choices that are not good, or you do things that are not good, and you regret them, but you've got to learn from them and move on, you know. And I think that if young people today can see that through me, that my life was not always perfect. I didn't always do everything what I was supposed to do. I wasn't always the Christian example I should have been. But you can change that. You can keep going and, you know, really make a difference to people if you want to. This week it kind of hit me in the face at school, because I wear a cross all the time on my necklace. I just love them. Mm-hmm. To me, I feel, I don't know, protected, I guess. And I know that may sound silly, but I like to wear them. And so we were having, it was my birthday this past week, and my yearbook staff, I have all girls on my yearbook staff, they had brought a cake and stuff like that, and we were talking and celebrating. Well, they had pulled their money and bought a gift for me, which was very, very sweet. And when I opened it, it was a cross necklace. And I said, oh, this is so sweet, I love it. And one little girl who was, I don't know her very well, she said, Miss Anderson, how many cross necklaces do you have? You wear them all the time. And I said, oh, I don't know. And I was trying to think, and somebody said, why do you wear a cross all the time? And this was just their conversation. And this other little girl says, because she loves Jesus. Don't you know that? And I thought, you know, me just wearing a cross necklace at school, but it's just because it's something I enjoy. I never thought about them thinking that, mm-hmm. or that, you know, image that was given. But that was the impression those kids got from that. And I was like, yes, I do. Like that, you know. And so it was just, it hit me in my face what these kids are picking up from me.
Well, I got a little secret to tell you. Okay. The cross necklace is just a hint. I mean, they see that. That's something tangible that they can see, and that they identify that. They notice it. But that's just a reminder to them that they see something much deeper than a cross necklace. They see Christ, and that's what I was trying to get at just a minute ago. You know, so I have such a great respect for anybody in the teaching profession. I really do, because I think so many teachers get sold short. I think it's easy for parents to become disgruntled with teachers when things don't go exactly the way they think they should for their child. I think teachers are oftentimes on the defensive when they have to have a conference with a parent thinking they're going to be attacked. And I just think that's sad, because what parents need to understand, and what I think teachers do understand, is you're doing more than just teaching a subject. You have these young people for a significant part of their growing up years when they are most impressionable. Mm-hmm. And you get a chance to mold them almost like you would your own kids. Not quite to the same extent, but
right.
But you do, they get to see your personality. They get to see what's important to you, not just the subject you're teaching, but they can't help but get to know you as a person. And so they see the cross necklace, and that's no surprise to them. It's not inconsistent in their mind, because they see a person who is spiritually focused, someone who is a church goer, someone who is not perfect, but wants to be perfect, someone who wants to be pleasing to God, and that makes an impression. And I just, I didn't mean to take over the conversation here, but I just want you to know that it is so important for you to realize God is at work in your life, and He's touching people left and right every single day, through your classroom, through your attendance at a football game, through wherever you are working with the annual staff, whatever it is. And so I just commend you, and I hope that you'll just keep on being you and let God use you the way He has.
Thank you so much.
So, Kim, I just want to say thank you for being with me today, and it's been a great conversation. And again, just a reminder, not only to ourselves here, but to all of our listeners, let's open our eyes and let's ask ourselves, what is God up to? What is He doing in my life? Because our lives are bigger than ourselves. God has a story that He's still writing, a story that He's still telling. And just like Abraham and Moses and David of old, you get to be a part of the story, and I get to be a part of the story. And that's pretty fascinating.
It really is. I just hope that as I grow older, I can be that influence on younger people and be there for them, where people like I mentioned before, like Miss Vandiver and Miss Daniels and some of the other ladies of the church were so supportive of me my whole life and made such a difference to me that I can do the same. And I really want to be part of that for my grandchildren and my children. That means a lot to me, that they come to church and that they believe. Because I think when you have God, no matter what happens in your life, you've always got somebody to depend on.
That's right.
That's what my mom would say. She would say, you need to pray about it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've always done. And there's been many instances in my life where I can tell you that God brought me through it. I've had some very hard times in my life, with illness, or, I had a cancer scare one time, and I prayed that night. I cried all night long, and I prayed that night for peace. And it was weird. The next day, I just felt like, okay, I can do this, So I just felt like he was working. So I just hope that other people can see it, because if you have that, you have everything. That's right.
That's right. And God is so good. Well, again, thank you for being with me today, and it's been a good conversation.
Thank you.
All right, that's Kim Anderson, and that's this week's edition of Unveiled. Thank you for listening. You have been listening to Unveiled, a presentation of the Church Street Church of Christ in Lewisburg, Tennessee. I am Kyle Bolton, the pulpit minister at Church Street, and I would like to personally invite you to come be with us during our times of worship and Bible study together. We meet every Sunday at 9 o'clock a.m. for our morning worship, followed by Bible classes for all ages at 10:15 a.m. We meet again on Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock p.m. We also have a midweek meeting for further Bible study on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. I would also like to invite you to tune in to this radio station every Monday through Saturday from 6:40 to 6:45 a.m. for our daily devotional program called Upreach. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day. 'Cause
be